morning. My name is Julie Miles, and I'm the Associate Producer for the Meighen Forum. Before we get started, we would like to thank the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe for their stewardship of this land that they share with us through the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." However, sometimes there are obstacles in a child's path that can discourage and prevent them from following their passions into adulthood. In Billy Elliots, we witness the domestic and political obstacles that stand in Billy's way, and fortunately for Billy, he finds the support he needs to follow his dream. Today, we are going to discuss how we as a society can support the young people of today to follow their hearts to fulfill their passions in life. And today's event is being live streamed, so I'd like to welcome our virtual audience around the world. We are so pleased that we can share our discussion with you today. We will begin with introductions of our guests and then a moderated discussion, and of course, leaving some time for questions from you. Here in the Studio Theatre, the ushers have distributed pencils and note cards to everyone, so you can jot down any questions that you might like to ask, and we will collect them in a timely manner. For our live stream audience, we will also be accepting questions. Simply post the question in the conversation feed, and we'll do our best to get to it today. I am thrilled to introduce our moderator this morning. She's a teaching artist here at the Stratford Festival, a freelance director, and a teacher. Her passion for believing in young people in the arts is second to none, and she is a core part of our festival education team. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our moderator, Luisa Appolloni.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Luisa Appolloni. I'm with the Education Department. I'm an education associate with a focus in enrichment. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce today to you these fabulous panelists. I'm going to introduce them one at a time, give you a brief description of their background, and then I'm going to open it up to them individually to talk about their experience, their background, and their perspective on this topic. So I'm going to begin with Dr. Kathleen Gallagher. She is a distinguished professor at the University of Toronto. Previously, she held 2 Canada Research Chairs and in 2017 won the University of Toronto inaugural President's Impact Award for research impact beyond the Academy. In 2018, she won the David E. Hunt Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching and has garnered over $7 million in Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and other research funding. She has been a Salzburg Seminar Fellow, and 2 of her books have won awards from the American Education Research Association. Her books include, and I recommend you read them, they're fascinating, Why Theatre Matters, Urban Youth Engagement and a Pedagogy of the Real, University of Toronto Press, 2014. The Theatre of Urban, Youth and Schooling in Dangerous Times, University of Toronto Press, 2007, and Drama Education in the Lives of Girls, Imagining Possibilities, University of Toronto Press, 2000. Dr. Gallagher has published many articles on theatre, youth, pedagogy, methodology, and gender, and travels widely giving international addresses and workshops for practitioners. Her research continues to focus on questions of youth civic engagement and artistic practice, and the pedagogical and methodological possibilities of theatre. Incidentally, Dr. Gallagher and playwright-director Andrew Kushner, who is the assistant director of this season's The Merry Wives of Windsor here at the festival, have collaborated on a project that connected the voices and insights of young people and teachers in Canada, India, Taiwan, Greece, and England. Kushner then wrote and co-directed with Chris Abraham Towards Youth, a play on radical hope, which premiered in Toronto at Crow's Theatre this past March. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kathleen Gallagher.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. Let me just move this slightly. I'm so glad you mentioned that Towards Youth, because that was a really, really wonderful experience. How is my volume? Is this okay if I need it a little up a bit? Okay. Is that better? Maybe it's my voice. Dream it, be it. What an excellent theme, and echoes of the wonderful production last season of Rocky Horror. Dream it, be it. And I was thinking about this theme and thinking about the relationship between politics and patriarchy, which is at the heart of Billy Elliot. I want to share a little bit about my sense of the connection between then and now, and then tell you something about the research that I've done in this area, and conclude with a personal anecdote and how I personally enter this story of dreaming it and being it. So Billy Elliot and Britain of the 1980s, that was a context of the mean-spirited Thatcher conservative, I think, anti-youth sentiment of the time. Labor disputes like the coal miners' labor dispute at the center of the show, the beginnings of neoliberalism, privatization, and also criminalization of young people, especially socioeconomically disadvantaged young people, or deprived, as they call them in England. Are there connections to today? Are there connections to Canada, North America, Ontario? I think the cuts to education, which have resulted in terrible loss of jobs for arts educators in particular, is a really obvious connection to make. And that this kind of move bears a frightening resemblance to what we're seeing in the play in Billy Elliot. There's widening socioeconomic disparity. There's political polarization. And my sense is that in times like that, we retreat. Out of fear and insecurity, we retreat to stereotypes. We retreat to stereotypical thinking of gender, of sexuality, of young people. And I think all forms of hatred and othering are on the rise globally. I think we know that from the news. So I want to give you some insight into some of the scholarly work that I've done that really cuts to the heart of some of what I think are the social conditions that we're now operating in. As was mentioned, this play that that came from the work, the research that I did, it was a 5-year study, and it was working with theater makers and teachers, young people, social service workers in Toronto, in Tainan in Taiwan, in Athens in Greece, in Coventry in England, and in Lucknow in India. And I want to tell you something about the girls in India. There, my collaborator, Dr. Urvashi Sani, founded a school for lowest caste girls. These are girls who are mainly domestic servants who would not otherwise be in school. And I wish I could tell you all day about this incredible school, Prerna, which means inspiration in Hindi. And it is, all of the subjects are taught through theater. And it is one of the most high-performing schools in the country. So what she thinks she's doing is creating what she calls a misfit culture, because the girls are looking at the barriers and conditions of their lives, and for them that means mostly early forced marriage and domestic violence. They create plays about this work. They bring the plays to the streets. They approach the police to insist that they prosecute domestic violence, which they don't often do. They have petition signing on the heels of their playmaking. They educate their communities and their mothers, who weren't as fortunate as them, who were forced to marry early. And the activism, the theater, and the education, and the breaking down of barriers because of the structural analysis that those young women are taught is probably the most exciting education I've seen anywhere in the world, full stop. Back here in Canada, I was doing research in 2014 to 16 in a shelter for homeless youth just outside Toronto, in the north end of Toronto. And they were working with my collaborator's company, Project Humanity, and they were doing drama workshops. And what I started to notice and in fact write about and publish articles on was a term that we know, especially looking at quote-unquote marginalized young people, resilience. But what I started to understand was that there was a kind of creative resilience that was coming out of their capacity to build an ensemble, to work as a collective, which has real echoes for how the young women in India also work. They don't see individual emancipation as separate from collective emancipation. And that's what started to happen in this most unlikely place of a shelter for homeless young people, facing some of the most dire circumstances that one can face in our part of the world. So what was happening there was rehearsal for resistance, strategies, helping each other, but also creative expression. And that's also what we see in Billy Elliot. Another hopeful example I wanted to mention, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, the site of the mass shooting. It isn't an accident that the activists born of that were drama students. They were members of the drama club in the school. And they galvanized a nationwide movement, March for Our Lives. And they had a policy objective, stricter background checks for gun purchasers. I think we shouldn't be surprised that it was the drama students who came forward and led the charge and invited radically diverse others to join them in their movement. And of course, we know now that that was honored by a Tony for their drama teacher in theater and education, and their resistance to keep silent about a world that they're inheriting, not of their own making. So I'll just close by sharing a personal story, which takes me back to my 11-year-old self. And in our community newsletter in the East End of Toronto, they were advertising a new baseball league, East Toronto Baseball. And my father asked me, I was a sporty girl, do you want to play baseball? I said, yes, of course. So we went to the community center to sign up, and there were two conveners there, and they said, oh, we're very sorry, but this is a hardball league. This is for boys. And my father said, well, the advertisement in the newsletter says kids between the ages of 9 and 17 should come here and sign up. Yes, but it's hardball, so people would know that that's for the boys. And I'm sure there's a good softball league that your daughter would enjoy. So my father turned to me and said, would you like to play hardball? And I instinctively said, yes. But part of me was very embarrassed that my father was seeming not to understand what the men were telling us, which is that I wasn't allowed to play in that league. So he was dreaming it and being it for me before I knew that I had to dream it and be it as well. So they allowed me to play with the proviso that I was probably not going to enjoy myself, but they would let me try. And I was the only girl in the league that first year. That's not the case now. There are a few more in that league when I drive by and I see them on that diamond. Fast forward to my son is now 11 years old. And this past winter, I decided that I needed to get national coaching certification to be a baseball coach. So I spent a lot of weekends this past winter at the Rogers Center learning from the best, learning from the Blue Jays coaches. I was out in left field with Rob Butler, who was the left fielder for the Blue Jays when my father took me to Exhibition Stadium for $2 tickets when I was a kid. And I was being coached by the Blue Jays infield coach. There was a long line of men and me, and we were practicing backhand ground balls, throwing someone out at first. And all I could think was, I hope my knees don't give out. I'm terrified. So when I came to the front of the line, my affective, my sensory memory took over. I dove for the ball, did a somersault, landed on my feet, threw the runner out at first. The entire line of 50 men applauded, and the coach told me it was the Sportsnet play of the day. At that weekend training, there were 300 men and 12 women. I was one of 12. So change can be slow, but I'm pretty convinced that creative resilience is at the heart of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our next panelist is Nigel Burgoyne. He is the artistic director of the Ballet Theatre of Toledo. He is a classical ballet instructor and choreographer, a graduate of the Royal Ballet School and former principal dancer with the London Festival Ballet. Burgoyne has danced around the world in Australia, Brazil, Africa, and throughout Europe. He danced principal roles in Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, Giselle, The Nutcracker, Romeo and Juliet, just to name a few. Eventually, Burgoyne turned to teaching the next generation of dancers and has since served as the director of the British Ballet Organization, was the artistic director of the Cincinnati Ballet, and the artistic director of the Toledo Ballet. Nigel's passion is ballet, not only instruction and choreography, but spreading the word and the magic of ballet to area schools and institutions with educational events and demonstrations. Burgoyne has implemented educational programs for dancers and communities in cities in Norway, Spain, England, and the United States, and was the founder and member of the London Festival Ballet Education Team. He served as director of the education unit of the London City Ballet and the Dallas Ballet. Please welcome Nigel Burgoyne.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say really sort of how it started and some areas that, wonderful, your explanation, I really enjoyed that, of being a male ballet dancer. I was actually born in Chelsea, London, and then I'm going to go quickly through it and then go back. Grew up in Bedfordshire and Buckinghamshire, about 50 miles north of London. Left home when I was 11, very similar to Billy Elliots, and went to the Royal Ballet School from the age of 11 to 17, and then joined the London Festival Ballet at 17. I was the youngest member. Worked my way all the way up to become a principal dancer, and then at the age of 30, moved to Dallas, Texas, and then from Dallas, Texas, went to Oslo, Norway, and then from Oslo, Norway to Valencia, Spain, from Valencia, Spain, sorry, the other way around, Valencia, and then Oslo, Norway, and then to Cincinnati, and then from Cincinnati to Toledo. And I know it sounds very jet-setty, but basically that's the life of a dancer. The phone rings, you pick it up, and you move everything, just like that. That was the nice side. The tough side, my mother actually abandoned me in the hospital after she gave birth to me. I was adopted when I was 3 weeks old. My foster parents did everything for me, and they put me into a private school. I had a uniform and everything, and I was 4 years old, and that school did a program in it called Musical Movement. And once a week, we would walk in a crocodile down to the dance studio, and afterwards, the teacher came up to my mother and said, "Nigel has to do ballet." And my mother said, "We can't even afford this school. How can he do ballet?" Well, the ballet teacher said, "We're always looking for boys. We'll give you free classes." So I started with free classes. I did all of the dancing. I went into all of the festivals. We didn't call them competitions. They were festivals. And I kept winning all of the festivals. And it was one of England's most famous dancers, Sir Anton Dollin, heard about me from dancing in one of these festivals. And he invited me to Coventry, up to Coventry, to see him in pantomime, and I had already been accepted into the Princess Grace School of Ballet in Monaco, in Monte Carlo, and Sir Anton Dollin said, nope, he should go to the Royal Ballet School. So at the age of 10, I auditioned for the Royal Ballet School, and I left home when I was 11. Just before that, I had a meeting with an automobile on a country road which splattered me all over the road. My leg was broken, and the doctors in the hospital said, well, we're very sorry, but you're never going to dance again, and you're going to walk with a limp for the rest of your life. I said, really? Nothing was going to stop me. I left home at the age of 11, and here's the thing. You see the show Billy Elliots, he goes to the Royal Ballet School. There was no television, there was no radio, and there was no phone. You could not call home. That's what our life was like. We danced and danced and danced, and we learned our academic work, and we lived in a royal hunting lodge. If any of you have seen the show Downton Abbey, that's what our life was like. We were in a royal hunting lodge in the middle of Richmond Park, and the gates closed at 7 p.m. and nobody else could come in. It was fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. And there was the whole school there. And again, that was the British royal family had given us this building to turn into the Royal Ballet School. And it was, I left home, I was on a complete scholarship from the age of 11 to 17. Everything paid for by the British government and the county council because they wanted to encourage the arts. When I joined the London Festival Ballet, we went all over the world, Australia. We were the first company to dance in China. But then at the age of 30, after reaching principal status, you've got to do something else with your life. Your body, you cannot keep dancing. And I loved it so much. I said, okay, I'm going to be an artistic director. And there are no courses for artistic directors then, nothing. So what was I going to do? Well, I'll work as a ballet master around the world. I had a lot of friends and contacts, and that's how I'll learn my craft. Well, I went to Dallas, and I worked with them. I danced with the company I taught, and I was learning at the same time. Then the company went through financial problems. I had to move. Then I was invited to go to Spain. So I went to work in Spain for 3 years. I was an artistic director of a group of pre-professional students. And then politically, there was trouble with the government and the funding for the project. So I then was invited to Norway at the last minute, and I worked in Norway for a year, and then bumped into a friend who said, would you come and be the ballet master and director of educational programs for the Cincinnati Ballet? I got there, I'd worked with this friend of mine, Richard Collins, who was actually the son of Canon Collins. I don't know if you recognize that name from Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, the CND. That was his son, Richard. And 2 weeks after I got there, Richard was killed in a car accident. So I had to step in and become, well, they asked me to become artistic director. They didn't tell me the company was $750,000 in the red, and I had a big job in front of me. So I carried on with that job, and then was invited back to the British Ballet Organisation in England, and I was in charge of Australia and New Zealand and Dubai and the Middle East and Europe, and sat at a desk for a year and went nuts. I just couldn't bear it. I got out to teach now and again, but sitting behind a desk for a dancer is terrible. And then I was invited back to Cincinnati to put on my Romeo and Juliet I'd done before, and then went to Toledo, and I've been living in Toledo for that amount of time, since 1996 now. What makes young people step into the arts? What makes them, gives them that drive? Well, the first thing for me, I loved my dancing. I loved being in a studio full of girls. Great fun, it was super. A lot of them thought I was good, you know, a bit like Billy Elliots, you know, you think you're good, yeah, you're not. But I loved the leaping around, I loved the freedom, the flying through the air. Being beaten up by other boys, that's the only thing in the Billy Elliots show, there's no bullying, and I was bullied like you can't believe. I was in fights left, right, and center. My mum would see me come home with bruises and cuts, and she'd say, you've got to sort this out yourself. And I did sort it out in the end. you have to go for the ringleader. So when somebody came up and said something, I went for them like there's no tomorrow, using my fists and everything, and then they left me alone. And that's where you have to stand on your own 2 feet. My other love, my mother, because we were very poor, used to go to the jumble sales, we called them, down at the church, all of that stuff, and she would bring home great big, like 7, 8, 9, 10 National Geographic magazines, all tied up with string, and I would sit and look at these places around the world. Oh, how can I ever get to these places? Well, we had no money at all, nothing. So that was a dream. I wanted to travel the world. I got the opportunity to go away to the Royal Ballet School. That sounds absolutely wonderful, but my father was an invalid. My mother had a problem with alcohol. How was I going to go around the world? Well, I'd worked from the age of 12 and a half in the Market Gardening Centre. Then I worked in a hotel, and then I was an electrician's mate, earning £40 a week. £40 a week. And I joined the London Festival Ballet on £15 a week. But it was much better than being an electrician's mate. It really was. But those jobs really taught me this is the real life, and what I am about to do, if I get a job as a dancer, is fulfill my dream. I will be up there. I will take part in that dream. And I will never forget, to this day, we were chosen by Rudolf Nureyev, this Russian dancer who had just made complete history by jumping basically out of a plane in Paris and came over to Europe. And he walked into the studios of the Royal Ballet School and chose us to be in his Nutcracker. And he started first day working us like that. And here's somebody who had given up his whole home, his life and his country to dance. So we all looked at him. We all thought he was a Russian spy to start with. Because we watched so much James Bond, you know. And he was an amazing person to work with. And I will never forget that day the doors opened of his production of the Nutcracker, and we came forward to that famous music, dun, 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 dun. And I said, this is it. I am going to be a professional ballet dancer. I don't care what happens. And then in our English class, the teacher turned around and said, write me a letter. Where are you 10 years from now? And I was 12 years old. And I said, I was with an international ballet company traveling the world. And at the age of 22, I was on my second tour of Australia. So at the age of 12, you can make up your mind. And that's what I say to my students now. It's there, it's in front of you. Dream it, be it, but realize there is reality. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Actor, singer, dancer Jason Sermonia is our next panelist. And if you have seen some of the shows this season, he is playing a sailor, and he's one of the puppeteers in Little Shop of Horrors. And he's also in the ensemble for Billy Elliots, the musical. This is his 7th season. And at Stratford, you would have seen him in The Rocky Horror Show, The Music Man, A Chorus Line, As You Like It, The Hypochondriac, The Sound of Music, Carousel, Crazy for You, Man of La Mancha, Jesus Christ Superstar, Camelot, Guys and Dolls, and Anything Goes. However, oh yes, pretty impressive. Elsewhere, he was in the revivals of Miss Saigon and Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway. He's done The Lion King for Mirvish and Las Vegas, Dirty Dancing, Mirvish, We Will Rock You, Mirvish and the US National Tour, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, Loyola Playhouse, Mary Poppins at Drayton. And if you've watched any of the Tony Awards, you would have seen him in the 71st and 66th Annual Tony Awards, the 37th Annual Daytime Emmy Awards, Dancing with the Stars, and The Marilyn Dennis Show. Ah, but it gets better. He's also done films. He was in Honey and the Oscar-winning Chicago. He is a recipient for the Derek F. Mitchell Artistic Directors Award and the Brian McDonald Choreographer Award. Please welcome Jason Sermonia.
Good morning. Where do I begin? I think I'm going to start with how I got into dance. It's a very interesting story. So my parents immigrated from the Philippines in the 80s, and they brought over my older sister, my older brother, and I was born in Scarborough, Ontario, along with my younger sister, and from the east end of Toronto, we moved to the west end of Toronto, so we moved to Mississauga, and that's where I grew up. A third of 4 children, and my parents, middle-class suburb. Mom was a registered nurse. She worked 3 jobs, nursed in 2 hospitals and a caregiver at a lodge, retirement lodge, and my dad was a aircraft mechanic. And so my parents wanted to put us in a whole bunch of extracurricular activities. One, so that we stay off the streets. 2, they immigrated to Canada because they wanted us to have a better life and more opportunities. So for us, they were throwing us into everything and trying to figure out what we wanted to do in life. They threw us in arts and crafts, ice skating, not my best sport ever. Actually, tripped and fell and broke my collarbone when I was 6 years old skating. And my parents were like, maybe that's not your thing. Threw us into like Kumon, which is like mathematics sort of program. But one day my mom was at work and she was just given this pamphlet. It was for a dance studio. And on the back of it, it said, first-year boys dance for free. Well, for my mom, it was like, wow, this is like a BOGO event. I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. Why not? So she threw us into to dance. I was about 6 years old, so it was a good time. And my younger sister is a year younger than myself, so we were put into the same sort of dance class. So it's like obviously like it's like playing with my little sister in another bigger room with other girls, and there was only one other guy, and I loved it. It was like something I felt good about. I was expressing myself. A lot of people who know me, I'm a man of few words, so expressing myself in movement was like the biggest thing for me. And for myself, wanting to be a dancer was a thing of me actually performing in the basement, putting on a record, and trying all these moves that I've been taught at a dance school and then training myself. Trying to do pirouettes and aerials and flips, and it came to a point where I loved it so much we were put into the dance competition portion of dancing. So we spent a lot of hours from like 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the dance studio. So I'd go to school from 8 to 3, and then we'd be at the studio from 4 to 10, and that was my life. Dance took over. I was barely at school at times because we had competitions from Friday to Sunday, and sometimes if I was good enough, I'd maybe get Monday off. But for my parents, it was definitely, keep your grades up and then you can dance. Now for my parents getting us into dance, it was difficult for my dad to see his 2 boys go into dance. And then you'll see that sort of in the show Billy Elliots. So when my mom got this pamphlet, I'm going back, she had told my dad, hey, I'd like to put them into dance. And my dad said, okay. Well, if you want to put them in a dance, you'll have to get your driver's license. And at that time, my mom didn't drive. So mom's like, fine. I'm gonna get my driver's license. I'm gonna drive my boys to dance class. So she did. She got her driver's license, drove us to school, to dance school, and through these dance competitions and through recitals and this and that, my dad saw how amazing we were at doing this sport. And I call dance as a sport because it is a sport. It's athletic as basketball or hockey or soccer. We just have different training. And my dad saw how brilliant we were and how happy we were, and easily and quickly accepted it, and drove us to every single dance competition. We had this huge 1990, early 90s Dodge Ram truck, and it fat the whole family, my grandmother, my aunt. We all went. Literally, it was like a clown car. We'd go to like every single dance competition, and everybody would see this big blue truck just come back, and literally doors open, and like every single person was coming out of this truck. But I was lucky enough to have that support from my family, and that was a huge thing for me. Another thing that my parents also did was bring us to musicals in Toronto, and that was a huge thing for us because they kind of wanted to make sure that this is what we actually wanted to do in life, and if that was the case, then let's show you how professional and where you can take yourself. So they would. One of the first productions I saw was Miss Saigon in Toronto in the 90s, and it was the first time as a child. I was about 9 or 10 years old, and it was the first time that I saw someone of my shade of color on stage, and there was an army full of them. And for me, I was like, wow, okay, cool, like, I can do this. Like, if they can do it, I can do this. And it was also the first time that I saw an interracial relationship on stage with a white man and an Asian lady. And that was a really, really huge thing for an impact in my life as well, to see something like that. But through that, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I worked really, really hard into pushing myself into getting to where I want to be, because, I mean, just like what this is called, dream it, be it. Like, I mean, if you dream enough about being something, you know, you'll work that much harder to get there. And I, like I said, I quoted this before, like, you know, being in that dream is loving being in that dream. And if you don't love doing what you want to do in life and in that dream, then what's the point? So I think for my career, I'm still pushing myself. There's never it's a battle that I keep going through, trying to face what every show needs, and in this industry, and I think it's one of the only industries where you can be sort of discriminated on height, age, shade. But I think right now our world is coming to a point where we're becoming more open-minded about colorblind casting, cross-gender casting. And I think that we're going in the right direction of where these shows are coming, because a certain person shouldn't, or a certain age or gender should always be stereotypically played by that type of person. And I believe that from that 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy seeing that shade of color or race or religion or whatnot, we can go so much further with the shows that we're doing these today. Sylvia?
I have to share with you a personal connection that I have with Jason, because way back when, not only am I a professional director, but I'm also a teacher. And way back when, I was teaching at a high school, and I had the pleasure of teaching 3 of the 4 Sermonia children, including Jason, who would sometimes say, "Sorry, miss, I have to run off to a dance competition." And of course, he was talking to someone who was already in the arts, and I am so proud. Thank you very much. We are going to start to now ask for questions that you may have. I'm going to also start off with a question of my own to the panelists. In your experience, how does the socioeconomic and political inequalities of families and communities affect the prospects of children pursuing their dreams? For instance, what do you feel should or is being done to break through these barriers to allow young people to succeed, or as Nigel puts it, the flowers to grow through the concrete? So I'll pass it over to our panelists should they have any words of wisdom.
I don't know if I have words of wisdom, but your question made me think of my colleague Jonathan Nealins, who is at Warwick University, who is a real pioneer in the field of drama education, who was speaking some years ago about the changes in the education system in England, which predate the terribleness concerning the arts that's happening here now. So we were looking quite good by comparison a few years ago. And one of the things that Jonathan said was, we won't know the next Shakespeare. We won't find him or her because they won't have access. It won't be discovered. There won't be the level playing field. There won't be public education. That the stories are such great examples here. A theme, obviously, of strong family and parental support, but school is the place for young people who don't have that. And there are many, many of those who don't have that supportive home background for a multitude of reasons. So if we don't have a public education system, if we make cuts to the system so that arts courses disappear, which they have done in huge numbers across this province, we won't have young people discovering and then finding the means. I know I taught high school for 10 years before I went back to school myself. And many theatre companies in Toronto often offer bursaries. But now we are beholden a little bit to philanthropy. We don't have the public and governmental support that we once had. And I think that this is really, you have to ignite the flame first. That happens in many classrooms, not just in specialized institutions, but in the dusty, crowded basement room where the arts mostly happen in schools. And that spark is lit. If we're just simply relying on philanthropy for all of those young people who have incredible barriers to study at any level, never mind the highest levels, I think Jonathan is right. We will not find the next Shakespeare.
Yep, I agree completely. And when I look at it from our point of view, from the teacher's side now with my students, I give boys, you only have to pay for one class a week and you can take as many classes as you want as long as you appear in our shows. But the training is tough. It really is tough. And I make sure, one of my boys is now with the National Ballet of Canada, and he worked so hard. And I'm very proud of him for that. I've got other boys that are coming up. But I think for schools, what they should really do is take those students to a performance of a ballet, of a musical, of a play. You've got to get them out there, not just watching it on television, or a movie. You've got to get them into the theatre. You've got to make them feel the theatre is a wonderful place to go to. And then as they come out, here's the opportunity. Would you like to come and try this? We always give every student a free class to start with. And whenever I'm asked for, would you donate to a fundraiser, I always give a certificate for 6 free ballet classes. Come on in. And at Christmas time, when we do the Nutcracker, I have Santa Claus in the lobby, and he gives every child that sits on his lap a gift of 3 free ballet classes. So come on in and try it, you know? You may not like it, but if you haven't tried it, I know a lot of people, as we're saying, from, like I was, from lower class, we just didn't have the money to do that. I never saw a full-length ballet until I was 11 years old, and I'd been dancing since I was 4. And that's the only reason, is because when I was at Royal Ballet School, they took us to see the ballets. So kids have got to be exposed in the arts that way. Jason? I think that's Hollywood calling for me.
I definitely agree on all parts, and
We could do a little dance routine.
I mean, my story just like that was the Boys Dance for Free. That was a huge thing for me, and that was a huge impact. I think nowadays there are way more boys now that are dancing. I mean, in the 80s, I hope I'm not showing my age. There were less boys. And I think that we're coming to a place where we're more open, we're more expressive. I've worked at a local dance studio who has who have a class about to have disabilities, people with disability. It's a 45-minute class. I don't teach it. I went in and subbed in for this class, but the joy that I had bringing in those of disability also, just to throw music on and just dance. Just express yourself. Those some were in a wheelchair. Like it was just an open room just to express who you are and how you feel at the moment. And it doesn't mean that dance is happy. I dance sometimes when I'm mad. I dance sometimes when I'm sad. It's a universal language. That's basically what dance is. It's just another language that everybody can relate to because they know exactly the movement that you're going through. But yes, in the education for sure, dance is just another expression, and to make them feel more comfortable about expressing themselves in movement is the most amazing thing. I mean, I feel like, my mom said that I ran before I walked. Like, I was ready to dance when I was young. So, I mean, I've been wanting to just burst out and, express myself in any somewhat way. And I think it's not even just a gender thing or a religion thing, or it's a universal language that I feel that everybody should have in their life to express who they are and how they feel in everyday life. I hope that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I have some questions from the audience. This one starts off with Rudolf Nureyev, dreamed it in the context of harsh political realities. Can you comment on the role of group creative resilience versus individual resilience born of hardship in being, sorry, I couldn't read the rest, but yes. How do we instill that resilience, whether it's in a group atmosphere or individually? Bridging that gap.
I think so. I work with Rudy quite a lot, and I have to tell you a story which he told us, and in this day and age, well, you can't believe it. His mother, they shared an apartment with two other families, so it was 3 families living in one apartment. No restrooms, you had to go outside in the middle of winter. Hardship. His mother took down the curtains and made them into a tablecloth so she could go into the market and sell the tablecloth for food for the family. She went into the market, she sold the tablecloth and bought a goose. As she walked home, she was attacked by wolves. She took off her shawl, set fire to it, and waved it around and beat the wolves off. And they sat down and they all laughed about it over at dinner. I mean, we complain that we can't get a place to park in the supermarket. That's what his life was like, And he wanted to be, he was a fantastic dancer, and he wanted to take his dancing further. And I never forget that story. It just made me, and he couldn't see his family again. Even though his family supported him, he wasn't allowed back in the country. So he was a fantastic example of nothing is going to stand in my way. I am going to go forward. sometimes in a bit of a selfish way, because he just wanted to do what he wanted to do. But every artist has got that creativity inside. You've got to have that you will come out. You have to be told when you work in the corps de ballet and you're in school, you have to be in class, you have to shut up, and you have to do what you're told. And that builds you all the way up. But once you're up there, you can go out and do whatever you want. And that is the wonderful side of the arts. So when you look at his resilience from a group or whatever, there was nobody, I think, as strong as him in the dance world.
I have a thought about the individual and the collective. So I think we have, in our art forms, we do celebrate the individual. And we do love these narratives. They're powerful, of against all odds and against the greatest adversity rising to the top. It's more Western than it is Eastern, in my experience. And our institutions reinforce that. But in my work in theater with young people, what I see often is you always can spot those with the drive. I think we have examples to my left here. You can see those young people in a crowd, no matter their conditions, because there is a light that's been ignited. But there are equally huge numbers of young people who, for many reasons, can't even access that question of the light. The burdens are too great, the support is not there. And I feel that in some of the work that we do, especially in drama classrooms, someone else sees it in you before you see it in yourself, a little bit like my story.
Yeah.
And whether that's a teacher or your peers, just in the context of the study I told you about, all over the world, in all of those places, in Greece, where the refugee and economic crises, the intersection of those have made living for young people that, well, they literally don't have childhoods. It is a terrible situation there. And yet, when they worked together, they picked each other up. If a story was too hard to share, someone else took that voice and put it in the room. And so I feel that we'll always have an easier time seeing those sparks and nurturing those sparks. But for all of those young people who are neither have the confidence nor the means, they rely on their peers to a great extent to access parts of themselves that they don't have access to yet. So that's why I think the collective and it's a problem when we when we buy in too much to the star system and fail to recognize also the leadership behind the scenes, the leadership of the enablers, of the supporters. And they find purpose and meaning in that as well. So I'd like to see the whole system shift a little more towards, I don't think the stars will cease to exist. I think they will always emerge. But I'd like to see the system tilt a little more towards what we do as collectives, because frankly, I think our world needs that more than anything else now. And it is young people who are leading the charge for the climate emergency that we're in, and we're catching up with collectives of young people who are leading the charge. So I think the collective is absolutely fundamental to both the incredible stories of resilience and overcoming the odds, and also the lifting up of everyone, which is what we need now more than ever as the disparities grow.
Thank you. I have a question. How do today's education system support or suppress the unique brightness of each young person? It's a bit of a loaded question. Do we have institutions that are supporting that brightness, that uniqueness in every single young person?
I think there's more and more charter schools are opening, which is helping not just dance, but music, theatre, all of that type of thing. I know we've got them, they're in quite a few in Ohio already, which are if you can see your child is already showing interest in the arts, that's where you can go for your schooling, daily. So I think that area, I see a lot more opening up.
Here in Stratford Festival, there are busloads of students that come here every day. And I remember my first show when I came out here in Stratford, I saw A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And that feeling of coming into the theater, and we're doing these prologues now that I'm a part of this year. The first time in a couple of years that the musical company is doing prologues where the students get to actually be on the stage and hear more of the themes of what the show is about before they come and see the show, so they were more involved when they come and see the show, which is amazing. But I find that more so in the last couple of years, more and more students have come. There are programs here for musical theater and Shakespeare. So I believe that there's more students and more schools are more involved in the arts that are coming here and living the full experience here at the festival. And I find that it's the most amazing thing, because very few get that opportunity, and if you do and your school comes here, it's like the most amazing experience, and I see more and more of it this year, and I love it. We get this this number of just before the show we see the percentage of what the house is, but we also get the amount, how many students are actually in the audience, and to see those numbers grow and grow every year, it's amazing.
I'm calling to mind the show at Crow's Theatre, and it was an ensemble of 9 actors playing 21 young people, I'm blanking now, maybe 21 young people and 19 adults, played by 9 actors. And the school matinees were the scariest for them, not for the obvious reasons, because they were playing young people, and they knew that this was the litmus test. Were they as adult professionals, were they finding those emotional truths or not? And they, of course, turned out to be the most rewarding experiences as well. I guess what I would say is I agree completely with the examples that both Nigel and Jason have mentioned. But I also think, as per the question, there is a whole lot of suppression going on, either at the systemic level, where there isn't supportive administrative leadership, or the provincial level, as we're seeing now, but also to think about education as really always primarily about the relationship. So just doing the arts doesn't ensure a positive experience for young people. Mm-hmm. Just having the classes, we know that teaching and that those relationships are everything. And we also know from groups like People for Education, who do studies, that middle-class schools in Toronto and in the rest of the province are faring much better than lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. So that's a problem we have in our so-called public education system. The fact that middle-class parents can raise a lot more money to supplement trips to the arts, and other schools whose parents are working 3 and 4 jobs cannot, is a source of tremendous inequity in our public system. So I think we do have to do a lot of thinking about how we write those scenarios so that we don't keep reproducing the same access to the same people. And I agree, we're making headway, but we also have to look at some of these issues with a very clear eye and not congratulate ourselves too much and too often.
For sure.
Thank you. I have a question from an audience member. This is actually very timely. How can we solve the problem of our society retreating to stereotypes? I think we're seeing it politically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking far too much, but
No, not at all.
I think I want to point out that we're in Toronto. It's Pride weekend, and there are a lot of struggles being fought, and a lot of gains that have been made that are vanishing all over the world. Mm-hmm. So the question, how do we not retreat to stereotypes, is actually a creative arts question. We have to generate new positions and identities. We have to resist the polarization. We have to find ways to be in a room like this, to actually bring opposing views up close. We have to have a pedagogy of discomfort. We have to be okay with naming those historical wrongs that live into the present. We are seeing that with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We are making great efforts and making many mistakes. And we have to be able to hear the ways in which we are faltering and making mistakes, even when the best intentions are at play. So I think that's hard when we have an idea about how to improve something, to then be, I don't want to use the word called out, because I think social media has really created a climate in which it becomes impossible to make mistakes. And that's where we're really falling apart. We have to be able to make mistakes when we're trying to make things right and better. We have to be able to hear people who know better than ourselves when we're making those mistakes. This is not easy work. So we will retreat to stereotypes if we don't push ourselves into those conversations that can be uncomfortable, step a little bit outside our comfort zones, be able to think things like gender across a spectrum, and not get too stuck in our historic ways of thinking about these things, and to create a culture where it is okay to make mistakes, it is okay to try something, and to be ready to be helped along if we haven't. I don't think we do that very well. So I would say it's nothing short of a culture shift that will allow us to actually not retreat to the comfort zones, to the stereotypes. When I worked with, my first teaching was with in a school for girls, and they grasped at the stereotypes all the time in the improvised work that they produced. And then I figured out why. It was really, really insecurity that was driving them to reproduce certain narratives and characters that didn't even serve them. So it took a lot of work to sort of hold those things up and say, is that just what we grasp at when we feel uncomfortable or unready for something else? And to be able to name that and say, well, we're doing that now at a terrible scale. And we can intervene and do something different, but it won't be comfortable. It won't be easy.
Thank you.
Coming from an immigrant family, Filipino, and my parents coming to Canada for a better life and an opportunity, typically you wouldn't think that they're like, yeah, no, totally, you're going to be an actor. You know, that's not the first thing. Like they want you to have a very stable job. You think about 9 out of 10 times you're going to ask a Filipino man or woman what the profession is, or within the family, you're going to have a nurse in there for sure, stereotypically, right? So the thing of breaking that for my parents was an amazing thing. Like I had said, that they didn't move us in a direction where this is what you're going to do, or they allowed us to venture out of who we wanted to be and what we wanted to do, and I applaud them for that. I mean, I get the support from that, and I'm grateful for that. But to allow us to express who we wanted to be and to dream what we wanted to dream, and to have that support, I'm grateful for, and I'm glad to be an actor and a dancer and an Asian actor, and like I said, we're really trying to break through all of the barriers in musical theater, and more musical theater, we're seeing more of those themes, which is amazing, and I look forward to more of that in the future as well.
Thank you.
I think, looking at it, the arts can open so many doors, and I think at the same time they open the doors, it's going to open the minds. I think the main thing is to focus our youth on going forward, doing well. Do not be put off with things in life. Things are going to happen all of the time, but moving forward and observing everything. I've always said, if I could become a multi-trillionaire, what I would love to do is take all children from the age of 16 to 19 and take them around the world, just like I got the opportunity as a dancer. I went around the world, I danced what I loved, I got paid a bit for doing it, not much, but I traveled doing what I love, and I saw so many things in Africa, in China, in Asia, in Brazil, places like that, where it just opened my eyes up. But I was there to be a performer, and that, if I could take young people around to see what they've got in this country and what other countries don't have, it would be fantastic, and then it would break down so many barriers, and they would really appreciate everything that they have in life.
Very much so. The next question is, I teach young teenage children in USA. Private lessons. I have seen in 35 years such a diminishment of cultural support for the arts. I wonder how a private teacher can overcome this and still inspire and fill the vacuum. Often kids expect instant results. And of course, we're also inundated with the computer era and various technological advancements. So how can one inspire?
Well, I teach privates, actually some within the company as well, and we're always learning. That's the beauty of this art, is that you never stop learning. There's always a new skill that you're always trying to learn, and you know, the older you get, the more youthful you want to be, because there's younger people right behind you about to take your spot. But the most inspiring thing about privates is that one-on-one, that relationship you have with a student teacher, and you'll see that with Billy Elliots, and how he grows to become and get the confidence and the courage to do something that not necessarily he is able to do. It's only because he wants to do it, and that's the thing about privates, is that that person or that student wants to be that much better, and it takes time. You don't turn around and become Baryshnikov in a day. You know, it takes a lot of time, a lot of discipline, and training to get to that elite status. And I had spoke before, like, I literally would stand on one leg in a pirouette position and brush my teeth because I wanted to find my balance. I would pirouette for days because I wanted to spin like 10 million times, or sit on my feet because I wanted my feet to be the most pointed foot ever. It happens also outside of the studio, and it happens at home, in your basement, in your own time. And for a private student to get that time with that teacher is the most inspiring thing, because you have someone who can help you lead the way in situations and opportunities that some others may not have the opportunity to have. But I love that relationship, because that, you know, it becomes a pupil. That person is, as a teacher, you're giving off yourself to that student, and that student either takes that or doesn't, or you'd hope they would. I mean, you're spending all that time, but I think it's very inspiring for a student to have that relationship with the teacher and go beyond that.
I feel, for the teacher that's out there, always stay in touch with the local theatre and find out when the shows are and what student shows are going on, because we're doing student shows all the time. That's the first thing. I've just got sponsorship for my next show, and the first thing they did was, we would like to sponsor the student show. So I just contacted all the schools. That's the most important thing, first thing, for bringing students in to see a show. in the classroom with my students, when we're rehearsing for a production, one of the things I say to them, and it's sort of with today, this day and age, I say to them, how many of you get an allowance? And then when they say, I do, I say, okay, put your allowance together and buy a ticket and come and watch yourself dance. Are you getting value for that money? And that makes those students turn around and go, oh, I've got to do this for an audience. That's the most important thing. They now have to get on stage. They have to get over the fear of rehearsals, and then they have to get out in front of the audience. So I say to them, that's where the investment is your money going in to buy a ticket to watch yourself. I'm sure you'll want to see yourself do your very best. So that's how I work with my students.
This is really pragmatic. I think private teachers are so important. I'm agreeing with Jason very much here. And I think community arts are so important. Schools can't do everything, shouldn't do everything. So pragmatically speaking, as a private teacher, have a sliding scale. That's how I learned piano from the age of 7 to 21. That's how I got my ARCT degree, because my teacher, who was brilliant, had a sliding scale. And my parents, I was number 5, and I was the only one who got private lessons, would never, ever have been able to do it without that. And I didn't know she had a sliding scale until I was an adult. So I was with all kinds of kids and learning wonderfully from an amazing teacher. And I did not know I was different from others who were there. So that's a really pragmatic solution. I have another example. My 11-year-old son that I already spoke of is in a rock band in our neighborhood. And that's a private teacher who creates from kids in the neighborhood rock bands where all kids play all instruments and all bands have boys and girls. So he's in a band of 3 boys and 3 girls, and they play every instrument, and nobody needs to own the instrument because she has them all. So Susie Wilde has an amazing example of a private teacher who's doing something that schools can't do, that is spectacular and different from our older notions of private schooling in the arts. So I think there are ways, and I think it's hugely important that those things happen outside institutions and in communities.
Thank you. One final thing. Billy Elliot in the musical, he is bullied by the community, some members of the community, and his older brother. And that was then it's set in the 1980s. But the question that I received was, does bullying still happen today? And how can we, help the youth in that crisis?
My lovely wife and I have a school in Toledo, and we have a situation where, like I said, we give 6 free ballet classes. Well, a mother came in with an adopted son who was 9 years old, and he said, I do not want to do this. She did 1 class. He walked out and said, sign me up. That child is phenomenal. I mean, just natural talent, incredible. Spins 7 pirouettes. I mean, he's 50 now. Unbelievable. You know, he's got free scholarships to summer courses and everything like that, but he was short. He had a stroke when he was born. He's a small person. He's African American. A phenomenal dancer, but at school, they were seeing him on TV, and he was being bullied at school. They were picking him up and putting him in the trash can. I was a bit bigger, so I could use my fists and my feet and have a scrap when I was being bullied. He couldn't. So how do we stop that bullying? Well, 2 things. I said, when they come near you, you shout as loud as possible, and that will keep people away. That's the first thing. If there's more than one, you have to shout. The other thing was, he then started doing cheerleading for the school, and it's absolutely incredible. Things flying through the air. The whole school is now giving him a standing ovation, and nobody bullies him anymore. So his dancing has turned the bullying completely the other way around. But it will happen all the time. And it's one of those things, when they say to me, the parents say, and the dancers, the boys say, what can I do? I say, you've got to stand and keep going. Do not let them put you off.
I was lucky enough to not get bullied.
Oh.
Only because I think I was afraid of being bullied. So I wasn't only doing ballet, so I was also doing jazz, tap, and hip hop. So at school, like talent shows, I would go out and dress like Michael Jackson and do some Michael Jackson moves and do some hip hop, and I would do a flip here and there. But I'd also tell those who would ask me, oh, you do ballet? I'd be like, yeah, I do ballet so I can do this kind of stuff. Yeah. Because I need ballet to be able to do that. And the thing with ballet is that it is the structure for all kind of dance. Doesn't matter what it is. You're having more football players doing more ballet because they want balance. Mm-hmm. You know? But like I said before, dance is a sport, like any other sport. We just train differently. With that dance training as well, I went into track and field. I did high jump, I did long jump, I did triple jump, I did 100-meter dash, because dance enabled me to jump higher than most of those boys, or jump further from all those other boys. So I also got myself involved in the sports as well. I think that's how I kind of try to retreat from bullying, because I was open to everything else as well. I didn't just stick to dance. I went to sports as well. I tried to involve myself in all of those elements as well. Because everything does help. Basketball help with dance, and dance to help with basketball. Like they go hand in hand, because it's just another sport. It's just different training. And that's how I kind of feel about it.
But you don't get paid as much.
Right, yeah. I'm also not tall enough to be a volleyball player or a basketball player. So.
I wonder if Kawhi Leonard dances.
Yeah, right? He probably does.
I would think so. So bullying is rampant. It's probably at terrible heights, exacerbated by social media and platforms and anonymity. So we're in a mess with bullying, the blurring between online and offline. Kids are really, really struggling. There's no question about that. I don't think that individuals can stand up and scream and change it. I think cultures change it. I think many, many, many people have to intervene. It has to be spoken about very, very clearly. This happened in the baseball team I'm coaching now, and that was a homophobic slur. This happens with the pros, it happens with the amateurs. So we have to do a lot more work as communities. And the best example I'll give you is that in the study I spoke of, in the 5 cities across the world, one of them was Coventry. And in Coventry, we also worked with youth social services there, because we were working in a neighborhood called Canley, which is the most deprived area in Coventry. And this youth theater group, not associated with a school, had a large number of what they say they're kids in care. So there was a lad in care in our group, and he had been horribly bullied, as many of them had been, simply because they were in care. And they worked in this Canley theater group, and the piece that they created, called A Museum of Living Stories, had a moment where this young man, Bruce, was lifted in a dance lift by everyone else in the ensemble. And when he faced the audience, he said, "I'm not afraid to say I'm a foster child anymore." And he attributes that experience to the ensemble building that he did over a number of years with Canley Youth Theatre. So I think that's a great example of a community saying, literally, we've got your back, we raise you up, we are with you. And he could face an audience of strangers and say, "I'm no longer afraid." That was his line, and it was a very powerful moment. So I think we need to change the discourse about standing up to bullies and bystanders, and take responsibility as communities, as institutions, as collectives to say, we don't tolerate that. It's not how we fly here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We are at time now, and I'm going to first turn it over to Julie in a moment, but please join me in thanking these insightful, brilliant panelists.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, Nigel, Jason, and Luisa, for sharing your experiences today, for pursuing your passions, and believing in the leaders and artists of tomorrow. Thank you so much. We have a lot of forum events. This is our first Saturday morning of the 2019, so please, our calendars are in the lobby here. Check out our website for those who are on our live stream today. We do have some more live streams coming up later on in the summer, so check it out. I've got to get off the stage. We've got a show today. Thank you so much.
Ha 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 ha!